Let's look at the fantasy basketball waiver wire. Who's been added and dropped? Was it the right decision? I guess we'll give an idea of it now. Michael Bolton?
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I insist upon myself. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Blue Sky, joshloyd.bsky.social, on Twitter at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Also go to LockedOnDaily.com and find the best newsletter for your favorite NBA team. That is LockedOnDaily.com. We're here to talk about the fantasy basketball waiver wire. I've also got some thoughts on fantasy basketball leagues and settings in general that's just been sort of percolating in my head, and it's more of a topic for the off-season, but not as many people watch the show in the off-season, so I thought I'd get some of those thoughts out now just to start a discussion and a thought process, which I'm sure a lot of it will be shot down. And that's okay, because we all know the thing that we know. We all love the thing that we've seen a million times before. But I always think there are ways to do things better. So I'm going to talk about some stuff on that. Maybe we'll see. Maybe I'll talk about it later on. We'll find out. It is actually today the start of the Sundance Film Festival. What's your favorite Sundance film ever? Do you know any of them? Who knows where Sundance actually is? Because I only found this out about a year ago, I reckon, but that's okay. Because, you know what? I'm not a major cinephile. Shout out to old mate Mick. Let's talk about this fantasy basketball waiver wire that is so important to all of us. Who are the most added players? You know how we do this. It's not changing. The most added player over the last 48 hours on Basketball Monster is Arkansas legend Nick Smith Jr. Nick Smith Jr., I believe, has a real shot at being the starting guard next to LaMelo Ball all season for the Hornets. I don't know this for sure, but I don't think that Brandon Miller will play again. I don't think that Trey Mann will play again. I'm less certain on Mann because it's a very nebulous injury diagnosis, but it's like a bulging disc back issue, which to me suggests he's not playing. Miller's one is like very simple. A grade 3 tear of that wrist ligament is a 5-month injury. They haven't told us that it's grade 3. They just said it's a tear. I don't see any way that Miller plays. It is risky to drop him because they're not telling us. That is how I'm viewing the scenario. Smith is going to have horrendous nights. You think that it's bad at times rostering Keontae George for field goal percentage. Like, this is going to be worse. And you're not going to get the benefit of assists or the high usage. But there is some value to consider there. And we like to get ahead of it in certain situations. And I think this is one of them. 30 minutes, some usage, a potential at some point that maybe other players get hurt. I don't mind it. The second most added one, they're talking about guys who are going to absolutely piss all over your field goal percentage, Isaiah Collier. Now, Collier has an advantage over Smith, and to me, he's a clear add over Smith because he can drop in double-digit assists every game. He won't do it every game, but he can do it every game. And I think, a lot of the times when we talk or I talk or people talk, we have to be really cautious with our words, right? You can easily say every time somebody plays, and this happened a lot with the Nick Richards stuff, he will get a double-double every time he starts. And that's easy to say, no, that's incorrect. Absolutely 100% incorrect. He won't do that. You can say he has the potential to maybe get a double-double every time he starts. Every time he's out there and starting, there is a chance of a double-double. That's true. I won't tell you that Isaiah Collier will get you double-digit assists every game, but I will tell you that he's got the chance to give you double-digit assists every game. There's always the possibility of double-digit assists. And while the differentiation between those phrases seems so small, they're important when we're discussing or how I communicate things to people. Because if I say, hey, he could get double-digit assists every game, you'll go, Josh, you said he's going to get 10 a game. I didn't. I said there's a chance of that happening. I said that every time he steps out there, whereas Nick Smith goes out there, there's not a chance he gets double-digit assists every game. It's not going to happen. Right? The chances of that happening are 5%. With Collier, it might be 60%. And that's the difference. So I have to be better at really phrasing those things better, I think. Anyway, Collier is going to have terrible field goals. He's going to have terrible free throws. The Jazz are actually seeming to bring everybody back today. Like Collins, Markkanen, Sexton, Kessler. I don't think that's a long-term thing, but we did point this out. Good opponents, they're going to play. And then I can see them coming back, playing a few games, sitting out, moving forward. I think Collier's role will have some dips, and it will peak later on. Pig Williams is the next one. While Isaiah Hartenstein is out, Jalen Williams, big Jalen Williams, tall Jalen Williams, Vietnamese Jalen Williams, is a guy to roster as a streaming option. Yes, there will be foul trouble games mixed in there without any question. But I think they're playing the Jazz today. He could easily get you a double-double. He's usually a pretty good steals guy and percentage guy, and actually hits the three ball pretty well. I don't think he's a good long-term option at all, but for now, yeah, I don't mind it. The next one is the most obvious one of all time. It's Collier, where I've got no idea whether it lasts or not. I detailed all of the concerns on yesterday's recap. The weirdness of that game, the fact that Spo abandoned it about 4 minutes into the third quarter, the fact that a lot of the stats came in garbage time when they were down 1 million points and Bam only played 22 minutes. There's so many concerns about, hey, how does this stick? It does not matter. The upside potential of a top 40 player, which is what Ware has, you have to have him. You have to. Have to. The next two most added players, Moses Moody, which I guess, with Kuminga, Draymond, Podziemski, Anderson all out, a nice little schedule spot. I get it. It's probably more useful for 14-team leagues for Moody, but whatever. And then the next one is Vit Krejci, who's been pretty good. With the absence of Ricochet and maybe Jalen Johnson missing, and the Hawks have got a really busy schedule period coming up, Krejci at least is going to have a solid role, and I don't mind it if you're just looking, hey, 5 games. I think they've got 5 games, 7 nights. Maybe Jalen misses. Bogdan's terrible at the moment. Ricochet's out. Okay, let's bulk stash some games in. I think it makes a little bit of sense. On the Yahoo side of things, which we know uses it's a less than 24-hour reporting period on the ads, the number one player on this list is Daniel Gafford. Why? Derek Lively, despite the early reports and them saying, yeah, okay, not too bad, yep, and them listing, this is where it gets really annoying, and I do get some of what they do here, but they listed Derek Lively is questionable. And now he's out for 2 to 3 months. Okay? The report came out that he's out for 2 to 3 months. An hour after that, the official injury report came out and still said questionable. They found a small fracture in his foot, apparently, which is obviously, that's why I give them a pass, is they thought, hey, ankle sprain, okay, he's questionable, we don't know. And then they found the fracture later on, whatever. Lively's out. That is it for him. That is fantasy season over for Derek Lively. I don't talk about must-drop players, but that's a must-drop. There's no point even holding him in IL. There's none. Get rid of him. If he plays a game in the regular season, that's a bonus. See you later. So Daniel Gafford's a must-add player. Now, there are a number of ways for me to look at this. I was like, you should drop Daniel Gafford. No, I didn't say you should drop. I said you can drop Daniel Gafford. I dropped Daniel Gafford. And obviously, right now, looks like a terrible move. But this is what is going to lead me into this discussion later on settings. Daniel Gafford, prior to these games that Lively's been out the last 2, had been outside the top 120 for the last 6 weeks. And for 3 or 4 of those weeks, outside the top 200. With the way that fantasy basketball works, you cannot afford a player playing 15 minutes a night who's not a top 150 player, not even top 200 for a period of that time. You can't just let them rot on your bench waiting for someone to get hurt, because by the time that player gets hurt, which they might not ever do, then you've lost and you just wasted a roster spot. Yes? The idea of that you held Gafford and you got to this level, that's great. It's a W for you. But when you're talking about probabilities and talking about rational decisions, there are so many players that you could just hold throughout the league. The same thing could be said for rostering Day'Ron Sharpe all season. But what if Claxton gets hurt? Right? You could make that argument very easily. But, okay, hasn't happened, and then you're just sitting with a nothing on your bench. Now, Gafford is going to play big minutes. He's going to put up huge numbers. He is going to be probably a top 50 to 60 player rest of the season. Easily. PJ Washington gets a boost. Deeper leagues, you've got Maxi Kleber a little bit. So Gafford is absolutely a must roster. Don't look at him as like, I'm debating between. He is a top 50 player. He'll be one of your best 6 guys, almost without question. It is points leagues, less so. But yes, still must roster. But the idea that holding him all the way through was the correct process, I don't agree with. Of course, I don't agree with it, because I said that I think you could drop him, and I did drop him. But that's how I work through on logic. The next most added player on Yahoo is Kyle Filipowski, which is a little weird to me considering Collins and Markkanen are returning. They won't be there for long, but I just didn't expect to see Filipowski's name there. Now, of course, a lot of the names that I've mentioned as the most added guys on Basketball Monster are on Yahoo. I just don't want to double them up. But Filipowski's on that list, which is weird. Jaden McDaniels, okay, cool. Like, stream him in when they play. That's what we do. Keon Ellis, one of the most added players. All right. I get it. It's a one-day stream scenario. That's okay, but we know that the value for him, much like with Gafford, you can hold Ellis as a 17-minute-a-night player waiting for an injury. It might work out for you. It might not. It's part of the gamble nature of this. Isaiah Joe is the next one. Yeah, okay, like I know he hit 8 threes last time out and they're playing the Jazz. It's very hit or miss. And then Rob Dillingham. Okay. Also, what? Cool, I guess. Maybe he's going to play 15 to 18 minutes. He scored really well last game, which 100% won't repeat because he shot 75%. Not anything that we look at as any sort of long-term answer there. And then we go to Fantrax, the most added players. Number 1 on this list, Mr. Black. Fantrax has a 7-day reporting period. Black is useful. While Anthony and Suggs are out, and then long-term, no. I think adding him is totally reasonable at the moment. The most added player next on Fantrax was Ricky Council. Because it's a 7-day reporting period, there was a period where Paul George was out and Council was useful enough, but we don't need to worry about that. Duncan Robinson and Wendell Carter Jr., like they are okay. They're okay ads. Wendell with Goga out probably is worth streaming. Robinson's fine when you need threes, but definitely not someone that I feel good about holding on to long term. Terry Rozier, one of the most added players there. Nope, he's absolutely not a 12-team league guy. And then Campaign slid in there for I have no idea what reason. So I wouldn't worry too much about Campaign being on that most added list. I wouldn't worry about it at all, in fact. Today's episode is brought to you by a new sponsor, and that is Talkspace. Therapy is a game changer. It can help you manage stress. It helps improve your sleep. It helps you communicate more effectively. But sometimes finding that right therapist and getting your sessions fitted into your busy schedule, it can be a challenge. And that's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace is a leading virtual therapy provider and makes getting the help that you need easy, accessible, and affordable. And signing up to Talkspace is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, and that usually happens within 48 hours. It's convenient. You can take your sessions at home. You don't have to leave to go to an office anywhere. You can even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It has never been easier to prioritize mental health, and as a listener to this show, you get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNBA and enter the promo code SPACE80. That's space 80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNBA and enter the promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That is Talkspace.com/LockedOnNBA. Promo code is SPACE80. Let's take a look now at guys who have been dropped in fantasy leagues and the idea of how useful that is or whether they're the right calls. All right. The most dropped player, according to Basketball Monster, is Zaire Williams. Okay, cool. He's going to have moments of being useful, but he's also not good enough to hold through absences. And he's dealing with an ankle injury. Move on. Easy call. Cole Anthony's been dropped. Second most dropped player. Didn't play with an illness. We know that Anthony's value is short-lived because when Suggs comes back, he won't be doing it. And then when Wagner comes back, he might not even be worth it, even if Suggs is out. So I get it. Sometimes you have to sacrifice in the short term because, okay, what am I doing? With a 0 here on my roster, I need somebody else in. Is he going to be worth it long term? That's cool. Move on. I get it. Steph Castle being dropped as well. Castle is, put up some good games. Last game, not so good. No games in the recent 7 days. The schedule is very low. And Jeremy Sohan's returning. So it makes complete sense. Buddy Hield being dropped. Easy drop. Not a 12-teamer. Not even close. Keyshawn George being dropped. One of those guys that maybe we head to March and he plays 33 minutes a night and he's the 100th best player. That's totally possible. But also he's been a bad shooter nearly all season. The minutes haven't been a detriment at all. There's been a bit inconsistent. He is not a guy that I'm looking as a high priority play. Now, there are arguments I could make for probably 150 players in the NBA. They go, you could stash them and then maybe when we get to March, things have happened and they have value. But as a general rule in fantasy leagues, that's just not a viable thing to do. The last one there is Peyton Watson, who's been dropped. And makes complete sense. The Aaron Gordon's back. The minutes are down. Easy. On Yahoo, the most dropped player is Jaime Jaquez Jr. I know there'll be people, and I am shocked at this actually. I thought that with the trade between the Suns and the Jazz yesterday and the reports about a Jimmy Butler deal happening, I thought people would have rushed and added Jaquez. And I was ready to come on here and say, why? Why would you do that? Because Jaquez, when Butler was out, was not very good. And then if Butler gets traded, somebody is coming back. Chris Middleton? Don't know. Somebody is coming back. Bobby Portis? Don't know. Somebody is coming back. And I don't know why you would bother. But people have dropped him, which is the correct decision. Derek Lively dropped. Easy. Tamani Kamara dropped. I didn't think that he would get the trigger pulled so easily. You know my thoughts on Kamara. He's been solidly mid all the way through. He gets the occasional steal, the shooting's up and down. He's a solid above average rebounder for his position, but I do not think that he's someone you need to look at as I have to have Kamara on my team. So dropping him, I think, makes sense. Rookie council's been dropped. Yep, rightfully so. People did it. The most dropped player, the fifth most dropped player is Rui Hachimura. We finally woke up, did we? Finally woke up. Jared Vanderbilt is back, by the way. And I've had the question already, is he anyone to add? No. 10s, 12s, absolutely not. Points leagues, don't consider it. 14-team league for Vanderbilt. Maybe he moves to that area later on. But man has been out for 12 months with a broken foot, and he's not good enough anyway as a fantasy contributor to have any level of faith in it. The next most dropped guy is Kelly Oubre Jr., which, I get it, he wasn't very good yesterday. But yeah, I always find Oubre a hard guy to sort of keep my thoughts sort of centered on because he's all over the place. But the role continues to be good most of the time. So therefore, I usually would just default to it and go, all right, maybe we do that. On Fantrax, the most dropped players, again, 7-day reporting period. Quentin Grimes, that's an easy 12-team drop. Keon Johnson, easy 12-team drop as well. Again, unless you want to wait until the middle of March when things clear out. And even then, he'll be in the Nick Smith, Isaiah Collier bad field goal percentage situation. But he doesn't have the large role at the moment. So totally okay. Royce O'Neal is just one of those plotters, those 25-minute guys that there'll be the occasional good period, but it's really just, hey, there's a good schedule spot, a schedule plus. Use him and then go for it. We'll see what happens if they do trade for Butler. But yeah, at the moment, he's not priority. Neither is TJ McConnell, who's dropped. Mason Plumlee, the cockroach, easy drop. You don't hold him in anything outside of like 16-team leagues. And the last one there is Keon Ellis. So interesting on Yahoo, most added. On Fantrax, one of the most dropped, Keon Ellis. But we also understand the reasons behind that when we're talking context, timeframes, and how and when you would use somebody like Keon Ellis in that particular position. Let's now talk must-roster players. These guys are all, and again, a lot of these guys, they're going to be rostered. I just wanted to get this out there. All right, I could tell you who the must-roster players is. You know who is? Giannis. Yep, must-roster Giannis. Easy decision. These are all guys, though, who are under 80% on Yahoo. And there's a lot of inactive leagues on Yahoo, but again, these names just need to be mentioned. If they are sitting on your wire, I don't think they should be. At any situation, well, that's not true, actually. We'll talk about it. Khalil Ware, just must-roster. Tari Eason, must-roster. Denny Avdia, must-roster. Kelly Oubre, I think at the moment, and it pains me to say it, I think he's a must-roster. Andrew Wiggins, must-roster. Yes, Wiggins shot 4%, 8%, whatever it was, something horrible. But I don't think they should sit on the wire. The next one there is a misspelling, because I wrote Lonoz Ball. It's actually Lonzo Ball, in case you didn't know. Lonzo Ball. Now, in points leagues, I don't think that Lonzo is a must-roster player. But he's getting 24 minutes a night. And in category leagues, especially if you're punting points, I do think he should be rostered. Now, I look at Lonzo and go, it doesn't necessarily have to be your team that rosters him. But if he's on a waiver wire, I think that someone's missing the boat there. It might not make any sense to have Lonzo on your roster. He'll miss some games. I agree. But he's getting 24 minutes, 23 minutes. He hasn't reclaimed his starting job, Shams. But I do think that he's in that mix of like, hey, he is like a top 100-ish sort of a player here over the next few weeks. I think that's worth it. I think it's worth it. It is a little bit risky, though. I understand that. Droppable guys. Just again, to be clear, what does droppable mean? Does it mean you have to drop them? No. No, it doesn't. Does it mean you should drop them? Maybe, but not necessarily. It just means that if they're sitting on your roster and you need to do something, you need to add somebody, you need to get games in, there's a hot free agent available, and these guys sit there, I think as a general rule, the value you get from moving on probably works in your favor. And that's where we get to Kyle Kuzma. Yeah, Kuzma can almost undoubtedly be better. Someone told me that he just hit 1 of 4 from the free throw line in 3 of his last 4 games, which would actually be humorous that he's gone 1 of 4 in 3 of 4. I don't know. I actually didn't check that. I probably should have. All I know is he's been terrible. The problem with players like that is that you sit there and you hold him and you go, yeah, but what if he gets better? And you just get, oh, but what if? Oh, but what if? And you just sit there and you wait, and you wait, and you wait. And then there's a big game, you go, see? And then it's bad again. And part of the advantage, I think, of dropping Kuzma, I said this on the show yesterday, is that if you drop him, someone will grab him immediately. And then they get put into the spin cycle of garbage. Then they go, well, surely he just gets better. Surely he improves. And then they get bad game and 250th best game and 220th best player and the 230th best player. No, here's a big one and then here's a bad one. And then he gets injured. Then he doesn't play. So you can rid yourself of that and make someone else's team worse. Now, he could just figure it out and be great the rest of the way. It's a risk, but he's been useless. Feel easier to say to drop Dennis Schroeder. That's really straightforward. He's bad. It never profiled to be a good spot for him in Golden State. I thought immediately that he was a drop. It's been worse than I anticipated. Bye-bye. Jabari Smith is injured. If he's in IL, you can keep him there, but who cares? He's not good enough to hold if you need that spot, so see you later. And it is, again, this is, I believe in process and I believe in projections and numbers. So I can tell you that Christian Braun, I think, is a droppable player. And I know that his last 3 games have been excellent. They've been very good. And that is almost an impossible cognitive decision to make. Hey, Christian Braun's been killing it. I've got to move on. Don't. You don't have to do that. In fact, I'd suggest don't do it because you will just regret it. But when I look long-term at what Brown is doing, and someone said, yeah, he's got the best field goal percentage of a guard in the league. That's true. That's literally his only above-average category, though. And it's like 54%. It barely moves the needle. So it looks great, but who cares? That's how I view it. He has gotten these big games through 70% shooting nights, which isn't going to stick. So don't drop him, but I still don't think that he's a must-roster player. I don't think we need to be holding Ben Mathurin, but I've said that for a few weeks. With their team being healthy, he's a points merchant. He just scores a lot. He needs 33, 34 minutes. His rebound numbers, which shot up at the beginning of the year, have dropped back down. I don't think you need to hold him. And the last one is Terry Rozier, which I think is a relatively obvious call. He just is apparently just officially washed now. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Game Time app. Game Time is where you go to get tickets to events because we love events. We love going to events, whether it's sport or comedy or musicals or theater or whatever it is. Getting tickets to the events, you don't want that to be a bad experience. The event's going to be a good experience, but getting those tickets, you're paying extra. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know where your seat is. Game Time fixes all that. With Game Time Picks, their number 1 new feature, where it just filters out the fluff. It shows you the good value tickets. It just puts them out right in front of you. You don't have to sift. You don't have to go. You don't have to trawl through all of the bad options. It just shows you the good ones. And with their all-in pricing, you see the cost of the ticket up front. You've got the views from your seat on there as well. It is all there. Don't waste your time searching through tickets to find good deals. Game Time Picks will just show it to you. So take that guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Now, I said at the start of the show that I was going to talk a little bit about league settings, and I've been dropping little bits and pieces of this into shows over the last couple of years even, and the way we've adjusted things on Locked On Fantasy Basketball is to try and even out some of these things. The default settings on Fantasy Basketball, I think, hold the game back. The fact that we go 10 starters, 3 bench, daily transactions is ridiculous. That means that you have no bench. That means that you have no decision no ability to use your knowledge to hold and wait on guys because it puts you in a competitive disadvantage spot, and it also creates a inequality gap between the better and the mid teams because the good teams can afford to take losses. They can therefore then afford to hold on to guys, and the competitiveness of the league decreases. I hate the idea that the way fantasy basketball leagues work at times is through just bulk streaming. Who gets more games in wins? That's not a fun way to go. I don't, and this idea that somehow we have been conditioned, and I try to break through conditioning stuff as much as I can, and maybe I'm wrong on it, that the idea is, the waiver wire needs to be full of all these good players because that makes everything more exciting because we have to do something on the waiver wire every day. And the more I sit and the more I think, and I go, why? Why do we have to make waiver wire moves every day? Why do we have to be forced into making a decision to cut a player who might be pretty good just because of the constraints of a league setting? Why is that a fun way to play? I don't think it is. I think that sort of stuff creates disillusionment through leagues. It's like, man, with an injury, I had to cut this guy. Now I've got no hope, and someone added him, and he returned 3 days later, and now I'm done. I don't get why that's a good thing. I don't really understand it. I also don't understand why the focus is so much on this daily streaming and daily waiver wire. Look, in Locked On Fantasy Basketball, I made there as 2 fab processing times per day. I'm actually not sure this is going to be the correct way to go about it. I think there are multiple settings that we can adjust to do it. Like, this daily commitment to be on top of everything at all points, I think is also a detriment to fantasy. I think, and I'm going to be working a lot on this in the off season. I'll probably chuck some trial leagues out there like this, or maybe just make wholesale changes. And I know that this happens in NFBKC with those leagues, but a lot of those are leagues that are a weekly lineup setting, which there's their own issues with. But why we should probably follow the way that a lot of leagues, and fantasy baseball, the original fantasy sport, and fantasy football, the most popular fantasy sport, where basically waivers runs once a week. And you set your bids on for every Sunday, you make your claims, and then you go from there. Versus a constant churn where it's just like you got to be doing this every single day to get more games in. That's why I put the games cap limits in, is because this idea of like just churning volume games in is the way to win. And I'm not, that is, I think, a limit to how, not accessible, but like it requires a lot of time. And I don't know why we think we need to do that. Why that has become the nature of the game. Our benches are too small. It's ridiculous that we have 10 starters and 3 bench as a default. It is too small. It is way too small. The fact that there are 500 players in the NBA and most leagues have 150 rostered is a ridiculously small amount. It's too small. We have to make these decisions to keep the waiver wire active so that we're constantly adding and dropping. It just, I think, creates negative feelings in people because you force these decisions onto guys, and then if you consistently make incorrect ones, which are often out of your control, you just go, why would I even play? I'm done now. I think it's a bad way to do it. I'm not 100%. Like, I know you're going to have rebuttals to this stuff, and I get it. But the idea of this, we have to have always free to add every single day sort of situations. And we can get overreactive to moves and decisions and drops and that, when maybe we just need to be changing it more to, hey, this is fun. We like doing this and we can change our lineups, but being that active every day, all day, and these small rosters, I don't really get it. So this is just stuff that's all sort of been in my head and sort of just percolated out with this Gafford thing today. It was like, yeah, look, you could have held him, but all of the available evidence with the way that leagues are set up suggests it's a terrible move. But now it pays off, and through sheer luck, you get this big boost, or you just dropped him and you just get dicked over. There's just something, and for my own team, I don't care. I don't care about my own team in that respect. That's fine, whatever. But it's more just about the idea of that and the way that it generally impacts people. I don't know. I just think there are better ways to do it. I think that we have gone in maybe the wrong direction in the way that this sport has evolved over the last 20, 30 years. To be this everyday, attack, every moment, just bulk, volume, stream with small rosters and force good players to be dropped because that makes it more exciting. I don't think it does. But you know what? I'm just one person. Anyway, that was my little talk, and that is going to be definitely an off-season thing for me that we go into a little bit more. Let's talk about hot players. Who has been putting up good numbers, and is it worthwhile talking about them? Ben Simmons. He's a 73rd ranked player over the last week. Going to miss again today, apparently. When he's active, he's useful. But, how often is he active? Not often enough. So is he must roster? Probably not. Drew Eubanks, 77th ranked player. They got everyone back. Kessler, Markin, and Collins are all returning. For how long, I've got no idea. But I just want to keep in the back of your head for if Kessler is out, we stream Eubanks. Najee Marshall, Spencer Dinwiddie, 80th and 81st over the last week. Okay. I don't think that we need to consider them must-roster guys. I don't think Lively's absence really impacts them at all. They're fine to use, but also not musts. Jaden McDaniels is 83rd. We know what McDaniels is. It's a nice little run from him, but you can't trust it. You stream him when the opportunity's there. Holding him all the way through, if you're going to stream him every day, I know the argument is, well, why wouldn't I just hold him? Well, because that roster spot can be turned into 5 games, 6 games, instead of getting 3 or 4 out of him. And then the 90th ranked player of the last week is Little Chungus, Nikola Jovic, who I do think should be on rosters. How it all works out with where and Bam and maybe trades and all that stuff, I've got no idea. But for now, I do think that Jovic is the right call to have on a roster. Let's look at some injury plays now. With Joel Embiid out, Gershon Yabusele is useful. Last game, he was really good. But if you check the game log, you'll notice that not every game is good. Not every game is 12-team viable. He's absolutely okay to have, but to think that he's going to be this absolute gun all the way through, I don't think is correct. But that's okay. You use him for now, and we get some value out of it. Ivica Zubac has a abrased cornea. So Mo Bamba is maybe useful. Maybe. He's not... I know he's got the best knees in the world ever. Nobody's ever had knees like Mo Bamba. In fact, they're probably the perfect knees. So maybe he's fine to play all the way through. But he also played 15 minutes as the starter last game. Still, when you're looking for like, hey, who can be a threes and blocks stream guy? It's him. Mr. Black is on this list. We talked about him earlier on. With Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs out, he's worth using. Simple. I've got Rob Williams there. Donovan Clingan is out. A lot of talk about Robbie Williams at the moment, about how Americans don't know who Robbie Williams is and the Rock DJ. So I've been making these Rock DJ jokes, and you go, no, he's actually the Time Lord, because you don't know who Robbie Williams is? So, it's crazy. Anyway, Robbie Williams, the Rock DJ, and there's no Donovan Clingan. DeAndre Ayton seemed to hurt his leg towards the end of the game in the last one. Now, Williams is going to be pretty capped in terms of how often he plays and minutes and all that sort of stuff, but maybe you get a couple of good ones out of him, maybe? I don't know. The other one there is Mike Conley, and I don't feel super good about that one. It's more of a 14-team league guy, but if you're looking for assists off the wire, which can be hard to come by, and with DiVincenzo out, it just moves him from a 21-minute-a-night player to a 25-minute-a-night player, and you might get 6 assists out of it, which is, again, pretty useful. It's not going to be awesome, and we saw him start all season and not be good. But it's useful. The next one is Bruce... The next list is just other names, and Bruce Brown heads that list, because people have been talking about Bruce Brown, and again, we get reactive to one game. Brown was very good in the last game. He's been very bad in every other game. And there's some talk that he's going to be involved in this Bradley Beal trade. Maybe he heads to Miami and plays 26 minutes a night. I'd be very interested in using him. But also, look, it's been 2 years since he's been a useful fantasy player. Even in Indiana last season, when we thought he had this big role locked down, he wasn't very good. He was solid as a reserve in Denver, but that's it. So I know people are interested in adding him. And it is, again, if we get back to that discussion, if you want a stash and you've got that space, maybe something breaks for Bruce Brown. It is possible. But I don't think that one game is an indicator that it's all happening now. Ryan Dunn's on this list. People were interested in him, and with Beal back, it did sort of cut those numbers down. It's hard to look at him as a 12-team must. I don't think that's a thing. I've got Jalen Wells there because, again, he's been starting all season. He's had some little good moments and then some moments where he doesn't do anything. And to me, he's one of those just risky sort of a players that will get hot and he'll hit some threes and then he will play 21 minutes and do nothing. But he's a name that gets chucked around a little bit, and the role is relatively secure in terms of starting, but in terms of playing time or shot attempts or efficiency, not really. And then his teammate, GG Jackson, who people just desperately want that to be a thing. GG was solid last season with everybody out. He got a lot of usage. He was inefficient, and he didn't do much in the other categories. But Jar is there, and Bane is there, and Jaren is there, and Edie's there, and for whatever purpose he serves, and Marcus Smart, maybe he's coming back. Who knows? I don't see GG having any 12-team value at all, and probably not even 14-team. I put Justin Edwards on the list just as a name to watch in Philadelphia. He's a two-way contract player, so he might get Justin Champagne'd at some point, but they are obviously in turmoil. Things are going awry quickly. He is, like, again, this would need to be a very deep stash scenario, but to me, it's a name just to watch. I think that by the time we hit late March, middle March, this man might be playing 30 a night, and he might be like the 110th best player. That's one for the double onyxes, just to keep an eye on, just to see where that goes. The last one there is Zach Edey, because I think I'm just done with him. He's not playing enough minutes. He needs 25 to me to be a 12-team league player. At the moment, he's barely a 14-team league guy. He gets no usage, which was really his calling card in college. What does he do that is useful at the moment? The answer is nothing. He had some hot runs earlier on, yes, and some of my skepticism on him seemed like it was wrong. Well, at the moment, it seems like it's right. Of course, the book's not written, but at the moment, I don't see that we need to be holding on to Zach Edey, really at all. And that is the end of a waiver wire show with a little league settings discussion, which a lot of it was just sort of, off the top there. I hadn't fully researched or thought this and planned it out, but there are just certain things that I know that you're going to push back on because it's so ingrained that you've got to have a waiver wire with great players on it. You've got to be making moves every day. And I'm not sure that's really the case. I'm not sure how we got to that being the case. I know that I'm just one man, and when leagues default to certain settings, my thoughts are never going to work on that. It's never going to be a broad change, even though I can see the way that I think a lot of that stuff would really help. Again, just one man. Guys, hit the thumb, subscribe, leave your comments down below. Do something today to refresh yourself. We talk about, lifting yourself up or acknowledging something good that you did. You might have seen this on my Instagram that my partner does a lot of work in. She's a psychologist, does a lot of work in burnout and talking about sort of refresh yourself from burnout and just finding hey, I'm burnt out and the things that I usually like, I don't like at the moment. Recognize those signs. Try and reconnect with something that you do for enjoyment and for leisure and do it. And figure out why it hasn't happened. Why you haven't been there. Do you need breaks? Do you need to get your time management correct? Think about it. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.